Bam! What is going on, folks? MC is in the house. All right, let's get this party started. My name is Justin Garcia, also known as Master Chim, and welcome to the Warrior Stream, my live stream that I do every week, Wednesday, on the Master Chim official YouTube page. And I do it at noon Eastern Standard Time. And I deep dive on a topic. Sometimes we go 30 minutes, sometimes we go an hour, sometimes we go a little above that. I let the conversation dictate how that resolves itself. Aaron up in Canada, what's going on, darling? Good to see you. So today, I am going to be dealing with a topic that I talked about in today's email, which leads me to doing the work that I should be doing. What's up, Jesse? And that is the housekeeping. So if you have not yet gone to masterchim.com, I'm willing to give you a $47 program called Master the 24-Hour Cycle for free, just for joining my also free email newsletter. Why do I do this? Because the more people that join my newsletter, the more people I have connections with directly that doesn't rely on the wavering support of social media platforms and their algorithms. So I will absolutely pay you in the form of a bribe for a $47 program in order to do that. So you can go to masterchim.com. You'll see the information there. There'll be an opt-in form. Put your email in. I don't share emails, sell emails, or anything like that. And you will be rewarded for doing that. If you do it just to get the free program and then you opt out of the email newsletter, you can do that too. Doesn't matter to me. Just trying to spread the good word. What's up, Jamie? Good to see you. Corey, what's up? Sean, what's up? Good crew today. Willie, what's up, brother man? Good to see you. All right, so we are 5x5 on both YouTube and Facebook. Stellan, what's up? Good to see you. Good afternoon to you, my friend. All right, so let's get this party started. So in this morning's email, by the way, I thoroughly enjoyed what Midjourney produced in terms of a thumbnail for today's show. I got a kick out of that. I forget what the prompt was. It was like, man looking through a lens and seeing a scary, vibrant, colorful world. Something like that. And it produced that. Sometimes I do these Midjourney journeys to design the thumbnail image. And I am like 20 iterations in, different prompts and stuff, because it's like I'm yelling at the damn thing, like, no, I'm talking about this, do this instead of that. But today it nailed it. That was like the first one that came out. And I was like, yep, golden. And a little, I won't say this too many times, but every thumbnail, starting with today, didn't do it before, but starting with today, there's going to be a little Easter egg image in there. And you guys could see if you could find it. I just had fun doing it, hiding this little Easter egg image inside of it. But you could look for that on today's and the ones moving forward. I think I'll make a thing of it. All right. So your lying lens. Okay. Your lying lens. I talked about wrote about 3 different points I wanted to discuss and sort of frame this conversation with. And number 1 is what a lens is and how it affects one's life. Then the 3 major roadblocks in a man's lens. And finally, 3 questions a man can ask to clean a lying lens. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what the lens is first. And I've spoken about this topic before. Some of you guys may have heard me speak about this topic before. And I think it's valuable. I think, that's why I bring it up. It's, in the 3 roads method, one of the first things we do is we address an individual's relationship with his mindset. And a lot of the lens relationships that one has dictates how a lot of the progressions happen after that. So it's like this is step 1 for a lot of people. And what a lens is. A lens is the collection of, and segueing, I guess, automatically into the second point, the collection of biases, distortions, and blind spots that an individual has that take the shape of a metaphorical lens through which this individual looks at the landscape of his life. That means that what is actually there is interpreted by him through an internal lens process. Somebody right next to him, sporting a different lens, will be able to look at that same landscape and come out with a different outcome. Everybody has a lens. This is one of those things where I think people start to get ahead of themselves in saying that they are going to endeavor to remove the lens from their eyes and they're going to see reality for what it is. Well, newsflash. All you are ever going to be able to deal with is a perspective that is generated internally, i.e. through a lens. So I would say that a more valid, powerful, useful mission would be to keep a clear lens, and the effect of the lens on your surroundings, let that effect be one that is known to you, and ideally one that is designed by you, right? There's something to be said to being an optimist. If optimist is what keeps you in a functional state, you don't want to have that pessimistic, skeptical, worldview if that is not the worldview that's going to keep you at your best and keep you functional. So there's something to be said for the control that one has over one's lens. All right. Caceres, what's up, brother man? Good to see you. So the lens is how we build our stories. It's how we design our goals. It's how we pivot and adjust and evolve the direction and the aim of and trajectory of our efforts moving forward. The lens is the relationship we build with our lives. It is all through that lens. That being said, let's get into a little bit more specifically the three major roadblocks, right? So I mentioned them before. Let's start off with biases, right? So biases are the things that you are sort of going to be comfortable thinking about. It's going to be, and there's a collection of biases. You can go and go research those. I've made programs on them. You can go and check those things too. But basically, it is a way that you are processing the information in front of you. And these biases are going to slant the information towards a sort of predetermined outcome in a predetermined direction. When you have a collection of biases that are unknown to you and are simultaneously off mission, these are the self-sabotaging processes that come with an increased effort. And a lot of people will actually reduce their effort because they don't know how to move in a way that maintains the utility of that movement. It's like whenever I try, I fail. So I shouldn't try. Therefore, I won't fail. Sometimes these biases that are unknown to the individual have that sort of effect on their efforts. How do we deal with these biases? Well, I think that everybody, because, there's no way that you are going to remove biases from your lens, because there's an argument, and I would say it is the truth, that you are the collection of your biases. Your identity is a collection of biases, a collection of preferring this over that, of thinking this instead of that. And I think when reduced to this sort of dichotomy of decisions, this and that, this binary relationship with our lives, I think that, to say that you're going to remove your biases is just, it doesn't make any sense, in that context. So I think the first thing that one should do is identify what their biases are. If I tell you you absolutely have them, that it is what constitutes your identity in the first place, then yeah, it's biases that we can label those collection of tendencies with. So an individual to not become a victim of their biases should first learn what they are. Another big point, or another big category that biases tend to affect, is one's communication. In my coaching program, I have my mastermind group, but I also still have one-on-one coaching students. And in my coaching students, what's up, Johnny Groob? Big Fred. Also one of the guys in my mastermind. crushing it. In my coaching, I understand that an individual's problems, as he identifies them, is often um, trackable. When paying attention to his communication, the way he speaks, the way he shares his ideas, the way he expresses who he is, his goals, and a lot of, from an individual standpoint, from a self point of view, a lot of your biases can be controlled and improved upon, and in some cases eliminated, the negative ones, when we do pay attention to our communication. Today it marks the last day of the Complain the May Away challenge, which, for those of you that aren't aware, in the beginning of the month on my other social media platforms, I put out a challenge to everybody who's been doing it in my house, where whenever somebody complains and it's identified by the individual themselves or by somebody else, they have to make the form of a C, for complain, and they have to pop themselves in the forehead with it. Right. And not only have I caught certain people, but a bunch of people have caught me doing it too, and I stayed true to it. But what is that if not a plan to try and control the power in one's communication? There's really no good that comes from complaining, in a general sense, when it's done cathartically. And chances are, when you're doing it cathartically, it means that you've been disproportionately, unnecessarily affected to begin with, or you're choosing to complain instead of actually do something. So both of those times where most people complain, it's really not a good thing in any way. So the next, distortions, right? So distortions is sort of how we change the magnitude, the scope and scale of what it is we're dealing with by nature. It's when you are looking to add complexity, add gravity or intensity, or reduce complexity or reduce the intensity of a situation, just by engaging it. You're somebody who, along with biases, distortions, separate the straight line of communication between what your landscape is communicating to you and what you are receiving on the other end of that communication. When we are trying to deal with distortion, sometimes we try to revert to a sort of literalism when assessing a scenario. We shy away from metaphors because sometimes people can get trapped in these metaphors that wind up creating these distortions. We actually, when somebody says, oh, my legs are killing me, like, are they really killing you? No, then let's not say that. Why? Because maybe you happen to be, from an observer's point of view, suffering from a bunch of symptoms that are being fueled by your negative self-talk. So when I hear you use the phrase, my legs are killing me, I may tell you, maybe we should, take that phrasing and put it on the shelf for now, and be a little bit more literal with how we communicate, because we're creating this abstract story, this distorted story that we're suffering, some sort of consequence from. So these are the things that would contribute to that. Another thing is the removal of universal quantifiers. Now, universal quantifiers is a phrase that I first heard in NLP training. And what a universal quantifier is, it's basically these terms or concepts that deal with infinity. It's saying things like, I never do this, or I always do this. And you'll find that a lot of times whenever we use those universal quantifiers, we're using them metaphorically because we don't really have the power, nor even the ability to conceive of what these things actually are suggesting or representing. This idea of infinity is something that transcends our ability to understand it to begin with. So when infusing, these universal quantifiers in our communication, we're really now speaking metaphorical in a way that could lead to the consequences of distortions. So if this is an issue that you're dealing with, it's like, yeah, maybe you should stop. Maybe you should stop with the the always, the never, the my legs are killing me. Oh, this is never going to work. And, well, it's never going to work. Well, you know what I mean. Well, why don't you say what you mean instead of having me having to do some fucking math to figure it out? Because it's the individual that's putting it out there that's getting lost in their own math, and that's the issue, right? So blind spots. Blind spots is the last of the three roadblocks, and blind spots are exactly what they describe. It's because of our lack of communication, because of our lack of education, because of maybe conflicting sources of information, where they seem somewhat paradoxical in nature. So we opt for one instead of the other. Whatever the driver of it is, a blind spot represents a component of our reality that we just don't take into consideration, yet have the means to do so, right? You have a teenage daughter who is away in her room, and she's not participating socially. She's getting bad grades. She's all intents and purposes, she's going through some shit, and she could use some sort of interaction, some sort of prompting into figuring out what's going on. But because maybe, oh, well, she's in her room, it's her private thing, you have these blind spots in your logic that wind up compounding issues that you're going to have to deal with eventually, right? So with blind spots, how could we, this is a big one when I think with men have a huge issue with this, because in my experience, both personally and the experience that I've advocated for with people that I've done coaching with, I'm a big advocate for recruiting other people's perspectives. You need feedback from other people. To use a metaphor for a moment, our eyes are in the front of our head, so half of everything in the universe is out of our vision. And I use that metaphor to describe the need for us to adjust our expectations when it comes to just how much we could track. It's like, how much of reality do you really think you are going to connect with? Number one, the tools by which you are getting this information are limited. They're only going to get a subset of what is there. And then out of the full potential tool, scope of what your tools can muster, only a subset of that is going to even fit into your bandwidth. And out of what could fit into your bandwidth, only a fraction of your bandwidth can be dedicated to any one given thing because of all the other things that are going on in our brain at any one given point. All that being said, it helps to ask somebody else what they think. The more you could surround yourself with qualified perspectives, qualified, trusted, vetted perspectives, the stronger you're going to be. If I know somebody, let's say my neighbor next door is a master electrician, and he and I barter, what I do for his electrical business, and he takes care of my electrical work if I need any in my home. And that's just an agreement, let's say, that we came to. I have the ability to fix any electrical issue in my house. I'm not doing it myself, but through my alliance and the synergy that comes from that alliance, I'm able to do it, right? So there's something to be said for, you are as powerful as the collection of your alliances, the sum total of what that power is. That is your level of power. And it compounds significantly when you are able to functionally build these alliances with people of value themselves, right? So I think with blind spots, recruiting other perspectives, allowing for others' perspectives. I've said before in other talks and in other topics, really, we have to maintain. This is a problem for a lot of men. Maybe an issue for women too. I'm sure there are many who have this hurdle to climb, but for men specifically, it is a major issue that we don't want to listen to other men. We don't want to, because part of it, listening to other men and getting their perspective is acknowledging that we're not strong enough to do it by ourselves. It's acknowledging that we need help. It's acknowledging that we are imperfect. And some men are so insecure that they cannot make those acknowledgments because what the cost of those acknowledgments represent to those individuals. It's a small man that doesn't want to ask for help. And he doesn't realize not asking for help is what makes him small. Some of the most powerful people I know are surrounded by powerful brothers as well. And they are, their power is the sum total of all those people collectively. We've obviously heard phrases to that effect from other people. You are the sum total of the 5 people you spend the most time with, being probably one of the most popular ones. But I think, looking at the value of that saying, and I think a lot of people will, that saying resonates with them and they connect with it. I'm somebody who wants to look at the utility of it, maybe the mechanics of it. And this is what I got. What I got is, hey, who are you around? Why are they valuable to you? Because they are complementing your value. And the more you could keep that, the synergy of that alliance going, the stronger each one of you is because of the value of the other. And that just compounds with the more people that are involved in those alliances, right? Remember, I'm the guy that wrote, the saying and made the shirt, Tribe Matters. There are reasons for that, right? So, Frank, what's up, brother man? Good to see you. Cherrytown Vibe. All right. Aaron says, I forgot a lot, so I'm going to be trying it more for June. Okay. That was the complaining. The made the complaint away. I guess you're going to June the complaint away. Big Frank says, called myself several times. Easy to cut it short. I was conscious of it. Right on. Aaron says, I could never. I find in general it's more people just loathing the fact that it's going to take more effort than it seems they're willing to spend. Yeah. And I would say in addition to that, it's also people just being irresponsible with their words. I always wake up on time. Always. Because that doesn't just mean, or it doesn't imply in the past. It also implies in the future where you don't even know what's going to happen in the future. So how could you say there's just a limitation? People are just, playing loosey-goosey with their terminology. Words mean things and shit, Aaron writes, yeah, but I shouldn't have to. Well, you do. Put it in the effort or shut the fuck up. I completely agree. One of the hardest parts of investing in oneself, right? And I've experienced it. Obviously, this is the share I'm about to make, but I know that you guys can easily relate in some context, especially if you're listening to my stuff, right? If you're listening to my stuff, you're not always going to feel comfortable, right? And you're not in front of me, so you get to avoid, that interaction. Some of my students don't get to avoid that, and it's a different experience entirely, I'm sure. But when you're working on yourself, sometimes it's a downer. I don't have a better way to say it at the moment, but it's a downer to realize and to constantly be reminded that everybody you're surrounded by isn't doing that same work. So you'll find people that, I've collected plenty of enemies over the years of people who have just emotionally, and I would define it as people who have emotionally anchored themselves, their identity, to being antithetical to me. They define themselves as the anti-me or against me, and they don't know who they are if they don't have that fueling their efforts. And it may be lesser now than in the past, but there has always been points where I see people who still have this venom towards me, and I've since the last time maybe I've interacted with them, I've just gone through so much work. I've just done so much stuff. I've just moved along, and I just don't identify myself in any way with that conflict. And you see there's this just imbalance in energy, and it's you got to learn how to deal with that. I've had to learn how to deal with that. I've had to learn how to talk to people that, they ask me for some help, and I give them some, friendly, free advice. And we all know the value of free advice. And but they seemed to want it, so I gave it to them. It didn't cost me much to give them whatever advice I've given them. And then, fast forward on the timeline a bit, I check in with them, happen to interact with them in some way, and I asked for the update on that, that advice I'd given them before, and they did nothing with it. And at that moment when I realized they've done nothing with it, even though now I expect they're going to do nothing with it when I'm even giving it, right? So I don't put any expectations on it when I give it to them. But those times when I realized that, I thought this guy was going to do something with this and he didn't, I now have to learn that me becoming resentful is me expecting him to be me. And he was never going to do it. How do I know that? Because here he is, right? It's difficult, because sometimes people will be motivated to invest less in themselves, to make less of the changes that they internally know they should make, to be true to themselves. And they'll become demotivated to do that. And they'll start convincing themselves to not make those changes because of who they'll lose along the way. Because they know there are going to be some people who just are not going to make it to the next chapter of the book. And they like that character. So they want this chapter to keep going on. So they'll find ways to keep this character in the book by customizing the next chapter to include these characters. And I would say, using this book metaphor, it's, if the story of your life is going to be dictated by some individuals that you happen to have run into along the way, then so be it. It's your choice. But again, just rehashing what I had said a couple of moments ago, it can be difficult. It can be difficult. It could feel, like a downer. It's somewhat tragic when these people who at one point in your life were so important, so significant, you thought the world of, just wind up staying where they're at while you're climbing the ladder. And what motivated you at one point in your life because of how high in the ladder they seemed, now you realize that you actually sabotage your efforts by trying to look down and see where they are, and there's a certain point where you just got to keep it moving. I'll give you an example of this in real world applications. There's a point where when I started with jiu-jitsu, I became so obsessively committed to becoming good at jiu-jitsu that there were plenty of friends of mine that, hey, we're going to go to the park, we're going to go to the movies, let's go hang out, there's this party, and it's like, hey, I'm going to be at my jiu-jitsu school. You want to hang out with me? Hang out there, because that's where I'm going to be, and that's what I'm going to do. And my love for jiu-jitsu and the obsession, the frenzy, they call it, that occurred in the beginning, it was able to help me deal with these other people, pretty matter-of-factly, because I wasn't in my head about it. I had too much shit to do. And there's times now where I get like that also, but then there are those times where it's like, man, it's like, I guess I'm not going to be cool with that guy anymore, or I guess, we're not going to hang out anymore, or I've had friends in the past where, like I was close with their kids, like they were like nieces and nephews. And it's like, this relationship went bad. Am I no longer okay with the kids? And it's just some stuff you got to sort out. And part of investing in yourself and looking to just operate in a higher level, that's part of the cost of admission. And I would say the more you know about that, the more you could effectively build the bridge. If you guys have ever seen my Alliance Codes videos, building the bridge is a very valuable resource and a very valuable strategy because of this. It's like, well, they're not going to be my best friend anymore, but can I make them a little bit less of a best friend? Can I make them a good friend? Can I make they're not going to be my, my neighbor anymore, but can I still be somebody that I check in with every once in a while? Do we still send them a holiday card? It's just finding out how you could, what role they play, what role this character plays in the next chapter, because you got to write the next chapter and the character may or not be involved in it. So it's accepting that and then just trying to make the most out of what that happens to be, right? So the last thing, so for these three biases, these three lying lens attributes, biases, distortions, and blind spots being the three, I'm going to go over 3 questions that we could ask to sort of assess where we're at with this and maybe prompt us to start doing the work necessary to resolve it. And for biases, when you feel that they may be negatively affecting you and the trajectory of your efforts, the outcomes of those efforts, a good question to ask is, looking at my situation that I am biased toward, admittedly, what would 1,000 different people say about this same scenario? And you do the mental exercise of, well, if there were 1,000 people who looked at my circumstances that I have this reaction to, what would they say about it? Would they offer me the same advice that I'm offering myself? Would it be different? If it is different, are there some common answers that these 1,000 people would give? And what is the most common out of all of them? And why am I not choosing that one? Do I have a reason? Do I have a good reason? And it gets us out of our head, and it starts to have us assess from different perspectives, albeit artificial ones in this particular exercise, but it has us generate different perspectives so we're not solely emotionally being led by our own, which may be negatively controlled by a bias that we're not even aware of, right? The next, what question can we ask to manage distortions? This one is pretty easy, all right? And when I share this question, it sort of helps us understand also what distortions may be. The question you would ask is, what would a robot, or how would a robot describe this? How would a robot describe what I'm looking at right now? Because the robot wouldn't have any of these distortions. They would be very, very literal, ultra literal in how they describe the situation. And our distortions, again, is how we change the scope and scale. You know, mountains, molehills, mountains. Like, we swap it based on the energy that we happen to be building or having at the time, or building in the interaction, whatever we're describing to begin with. Well, if I ask myself, well, how would a robot describe this? You usually get a very useful, matter-of-fact collection of facts. And that is probably the best information you need to sort of build a response, a reaction to, or with, right? And finally, blind spots. Well, I think it's fairly obvious what the question is. And again, you could be in a situation where you have a job offer, or you have the opportunity to do something, or this thing, you're in a situation that's really stressing you out. These questions pertain to all of those scenarios. It's not like, hey, I think I'm suffering from a bias. Let me ask, what are 1,000 people going to say about this? It is any significant situation or scenario, you should run these 3 questions by you. It would be useful to do so. For blind spots, the easy question to ask is, what am I not seeing? What am I not seeing? By asking yourself that, you are actually presuming that there is something you are not seeing. So you ask yourself the proper question, your brain starts to generate useful answers, right? So for the blind spots, it's, what am I not seeing? And now maybe at that point, when looking to answer that question, it does prompt you to start asking other people for their perspectives, right? So biases, what would 1,000 different people say about this? Distortions, how would a robot describe this? And blind spots, what am I not seeing? Right? So those 3 conditions are the conditions of the lying lens. And those questions are going to help you begin the process of navigating them. Like I said in the beginning, like, there is no getting away from a lens. There is no, well, I don't really have a lens, or I used to have a lens, but then I did this work and now I don't have a lens, and I see it exactly for what it is. I would ask you, like, well, what is it that makes you think that what it is you're describing is not your interpretation of it to begin with? Right? And I've used examples before. It's like, If I'm saying, I have a can of Monster and I'm conveying that to somebody else, in order for them to understand me, they need to understand, number one, English language. A can of Monster. Do I mean like a monster, like a fictional creature from stories, or do I mean an energy drink, right? That I drink way too many of a day, right? A can. What am I talking about? A can. Is that a specific measurement, or do I mean a can as in a universally sized soda can, or like that doesn't mean what I'm saying, and what I'm saying doesn't mean that. And people need to understand that. So we're already sharing some of the context and perspective to even be able to functionally use language with one another. So again, all these things are components of our lenses, right? So there is no removing a lens. It is engineering and cleaning that lens so that it gives you the best possible outcome with the perspective that it provides, right? Sean says we can easily create ceilings for ourselves. I don't know what I said that prompted that, but I do agree with the sentiment. Cherrytown Vibe. All right. One of my students from the Bronx, for context. Man, fuck that. They call me fake wrestler ass. Nesty? Nutra? I don't know what that means. and walking contradiction. Meanwhile, they do nothing to change their lives. Why are people so rejecting of people they claim to love? Well, I would say that any adult man or woman is given a collection of tools that are more powerful than many of them ever learn to use. I think when you look at somebody, you said, why are people so rejecting of people they claim to love? Well, if you ask them, what does love mean? What does, walking contradiction mean? Or any of the terms that they use, you ask them what they mean. And then you take the collection of what they're communicating with in terms of terminology, and you start to, okay, so this, when you say this, it means this, right? Okay, this word means this. This word means this. And then you start to look and build by their definition what the sentiment of what their communication is. It doesn't take much to realize how much they contradict themselves. And then what happens when you look through a literal lens at their communication, you start to realize that, they're just emotionally using metaphor, but disguising it as some sort of accurate, descriptive communication. It's really catharsis, right? It's really, I don't like the way this makes me feel, so I'm going to say something directed at that so I feel better internally. And that lack of responsibility when it comes to communication is running rampant these days, right? I spoke before about how we all know, we've heard the phrase, when we describe a man as, that guy's talking like he's never been punched in the face. And I've shared that, growing up in the Bronx, I was a wild boy. I've hit a lot of people. And there are many people that I've hit. And when I hit them, they didn't realize they were going to be hit. And I'll say a lot of them, I hit them, and then I saw their face. I was like, oh, we weren't about to fight. Oh, this wasn't about to pop off, because I'm always looking to hit first if we're going to start hitting, right? I'm always a leadoff batter right, in any game that we play, right? But there were plenty of people that you hit them and you realize they didn't know they were going to get. It's like, oh, we're not hitting. My bad. I jumped the gun right there for a second. And I think a lot of it has to do with this disconnection from consequence. People emote with words. They're just going to say shit to make themselves feel better. Obviously it gets compounded when we start, removing men in the homes, raising young boys into, grown boys, and what those rites of passage that have historically, traditionally, naturally, even one could say, have been part of the process of becoming a man, how they've all been undermined and sabotaged. And how somehow we think, we change. Let's say there's an assembly line with 10 different stages. We remove 6 of the stages, but we still expect the assembly line to still turn out the same product. Like, that's not the way it works. That's not the way any of this works. If there's 10 stages to building a man from a boy and you remove 6 of them, you're going to come out with an end product, but don't damn call it a man, not by any, traditional definition of the word, So for me, it's really, it's simple in that I understand that I have a lens that I have to continually work on. Now, mind you, the lens, like the why I'm working on my lens, again, is not so I get along with other people. It's so I can most productively. It's not even, and this is something that, you may need to meditate on for a second. It's not even to have an accurate depiction of your surroundings, which this is where I lose some people. It's having the depiction, having the feedback that the lens provides that puts you in the best possible state to be the most productive based on what our internal virtues and goals and missions and obligations and oaths, all the collection of the things that if we do them right, we're winning. Well, I want to look at my landscape in a way that puts me in the best position to do that. Your teenage son is trying to get into a college. He's trying to get into, Syracuse College. He's trying to get into Syracuse. And he's waiting for this letter of acceptance or rejection. And he is in the backyard. Him and his buddies are playing football, two-hand touch football. It's a Saturday afternoon. Beautiful day out. Him and his buddies are there. They're having a great time, barbecuing. It's like one of those days. Mailman comes. You happen to be at the front. Thank you. Get it. Oh, you see it's from Syracuse. And you open it because you're a nosy fuck as a dad. And you open it and you look at it and it says that he got rejected. Do you go and tell him, or do you wait until he finishes the arc of this positive experience he's in? Everybody knows you wait till tell him later. I don't know if that was English that I just said, but you know what I mean. You wait until later to tell him. Well, why is that? Because we want to preserve his state. He's got a lot of positive energy going on right now. Let him keep building that. If anything, that might fill the coffers for later, because we're going to be taking a whole bunch of it when he hears this news. So the idea of, we want to be completely accurate, not at the expense of the state necessary, the internal mental state necessary to navigate whatever it is the circumstances are. There have been times where, I've cornered, I don't know, if it's over 100, over 200, I don't know how many times I've cornered MMA fights, right? The overwhelming majority of my own students. At times I've cornered other people, friends and allies and such. And there have been plenty of times where it's MMA fights are 3 rounds and we're on the stool in between the second and third round. And my guy got his ass kicked the first round. He got his ass kicked the second round. To every outside viewer, perspective-wise, they're like, yeah, he's probably going to get his ass kicked the third round. Is that what I'm supposed to say to my guy? Is he supposed to ask me, well, what should I do? Or do you think I'm winning? And am I supposed to say, well, you got your ass kicked 2 rounds. You're probably going to get your ass kicked the third. Maybe we shouldn't even try. Maybe no. Now, why is it that I'm going to tell him, oh, you're fucking crushing him? I don't know if the judges are going to give it to you. but he definitely knows he's going to lose, and you're going to finish him this round just in case. I'm going to tell him whatever he needs to hear to get him in the greatest state possible, because I know the outcome is not predetermined. I know the outcome is going to be the effect of what he does in the next few minutes. Now, maybe there's a probability at most that I have, but probability is an abstraction. There are times where we want the probability. There are times where all we want is the possibility, because the probability is going to sabotage our ability to maximize our output. Sometimes you want the Braveheart speech when you got to do some shit that if you are not completely committed to, it's not going to happen. This is the power of the lens. All right, guys, I'm going to stop there. I think that was a good organic ending to the message. I appreciate you guys. If you guys are not yet on the Master Chim letter, which is my free email newsletter, go to masterchim.com. All the links and everything are in the description. I've written a book, TRIBALNOMICS. I think it's great, somewhat biased as I am. But if you haven't gotten your hands on it, the link to get it is down there. If you have gotten it and you did like it, do me a favor, leave a review. I'm always looking for more reviews on Amazon, because that's how the game is played. I'm here every week. You guys know it. I enjoy doing these talks, which is why I do them. I won't always be able to do them. So it's the power of now, right? Just enjoy it while it's here. I had a good time, and I appreciate you guys in your busy schedules and your busy lives hanging out with me for the hour. All right, I'll see you guys next week. And as always, brothers and sisters, pressure to power.